Joining me now for her first media interview in more than a year, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney. She was the #3 Republican in the House, and before that was a high-ranking State Department official. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to have you. So as you know, Gaza City is very densely populated, and Hamas embeds itself within the population. Do you think it's wise for Israel to stage a ground incursion strategically, and do you think Israel's been doing enough to prevent the loss of innocent life? We know Hamas embeds itself within the population. That's one of the things they do. They're a terrorist organization. But is this smart for Israel?
Look, I think that, number one, people need to recognize that what's happening in terms of the conditions in Gaza is the responsibility of Hamas. The reason that people in Gaza are facing the situation they're facing, Hamas has been in charge in Gaza since 2006, at least. So Israel, we have moved so quickly beyond the focus on the devastation of the terrorist attack, the absolutely barbaric slaughter of men, women, and children. The stories that we continue to see come out of babies, tied up with wire and murdered brutally, of people tortured in front of their children. I mean, the fact that people have moved on from that is really wrong. And Israel
just FYI, we have not, and we continue to tell those stories on CNN.
No, and I think it's very important. What we have seen, though, around the world is, even frankly, before Israel began any kind of a response in Gaza, we saw this massive expansion and explosion of demonstrations around the world, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel. Here in the United States, on our university campuses, it's outrageous, it's dangerous, it needs to stop. Israel must take whatever action they need to take to defend themselves, and the United States should not be in the business of telling them to stop, to slow down. They have got to defend themselves, and that means they've got to defeat Hamas.
Sure, but let me ask you, just in terms of advising a country that is an ally, a lot of people are drawing parallels to 9/11, although proportionally this was worse. This is would be the same as killing 40,000 people in Israel, as opposed to 3,000 as happened here in 9/11. On 9/11, your father was vice president. You came to work at the State Department after 9/11. Take a listen to what President Biden said in Israel this week.
But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes.
Given the goal of not just defeating Hamas, but a long-term goal of Israel living in peace, of a two-state solution, if that's even a serious proposition anymore, what lessons do you think we have learned as a country that we could tell Israel, that we could share with Israel?
Well, look, I think probably the biggest mistake that we made post 9/11 was President Biden's decision to withdraw from Afghanistan the way that he did. I think the biggest lesson that we've learned, and frankly, after 9/11, the fact that the steps we took for over 20 years now have prevented another mass casualty terrorist attack at the hands of Islamic terrorists, is something that we all ought to be very clear about, and we ought to remember. The lesson that we've learned, and the lesson that we need to apply here, is first of all, these conflicts are connected. Iran absolutely is behind what's happening with respect to Hamas, with respect to Hezbollah. Some of the Hamas terrorists, they found Iranian munitions, North Korean munitions in their kit. The Hamas leadership itself has talked about their ties and relationship with Russia. We've got an ally, we've got adversaries arrayed against us who only understand strength. Who only understand that they don't, weakness to them, frankly, is provocative. And if they think that we're weak, if they think that we're going to lose our resolve, they will, in fact, be strengthened. So the lesson that we need to learn here is Iran needs to recognize, if they do come in, then they will face very severe consequences from Israel, from us. But the forces of freedom are at war with the forces of tyranny and terrorism around the world, and America has got to lead. I thought that part of President Biden's speech from the Oval Office was good. I think that those themes of the indispensable nature of America and America's leadership in the battle for freedom globally, that's exactly right, exactly what we need to be saying. The administration needs to make some fundamental changes with respect to their Iran policy. We saw just last week, for example, the sanctions preventing Iran from exporting missile technology lapsed. Those are gone now.
They expired.
And the administration, didn't take any steps to stop that. We need to do a better job. We need to actually enforce the sanctions with respect to Iran's oil exports. We got to put the Houthis back on the terrorist list. So there are a whole range of things we need to do. And in my view, the lesson from the post 9/11 era is that American strength is what matters, what's going to keep us safe, and Israeli strength is something that we ought to be supporting and advocating for.
The attack was on October 7th, a Saturday. I think it was Wednesday that Donald Trump gave a speech in which he insulted Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, said the attacks wouldn't have happened if he had been president, said that Netanyahu let him down. He said it had something to do with the strike against Soleimani, but a lot of people interpreted it as because Netanyahu congratulated Biden after Biden won the presidency. He insulted the defense minister of Israel, called him a jerk. He praised Hezbollah as smart. What was your reaction to that, and did it surprise you that Trump could say all of that about the prime minister while they were still burying the dead after the October 7th terrorist attack, and it didn't have any impact on Republican voters or what Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill said about Donald Trump?
No, they were appalling comments. And, you know, you're absolutely right that there should have been a response. I think that you know, every Republican member of Congress ought to be asked about those comments. Every Republican candidate for the presidency ought to be asked about those comments. The other thing to remember about Donald Trump is that he reportedly shared Israeli intelligence with the Russians very early in his term. He also, as we know now from the indictments that we've seen from Jack Smith, shared highly classified military documents apparently relating to a military action potentially against Iran. He shared that with Mark Meadows' ghostwriters and political consultants, it seems, according to the indictments. So if you think about, not only is he out there advocating for complimenting America's adversaries and, in fact, terrorist organizations that slaughter innocents, he also seems to have shared very highly classified intelligence information, both ours and the Israelis, in fact, with adversaries. So I think it's simply the latest example of why Donald Trump is not fit to be president of the United States.
Who do you think is providing better leadership on the international stage right now, Biden or Trump?
Oh, certainly Biden.
President Biden also pushed for more aid to Ukraine. I want you to take a listen to what a sitting Republican senator had to say about the package that Biden is pushing.
Whatever your views, Sean, on Ukraine, it is a separate country and a separate problem. I think what the president did is completely disgraceful. If he wants to sell the American people on $60 billion more to Ukraine, he shouldn't use dead Israeli children to do it. It was disgusting.
Your response?
Look, I mean, what J.D. Vance is saying is completely wrong, ignorant, uninformed. As I said before, America is facing 4 adversaries right now, and major adversaries in China and Russia and North Korea and Iran. And what happens with respect to our willingness to defend Ukraine has a direct impact on all of those other challenges and conflicts we face. And the idea that we're now in a situation where you've got this growing movement on the part of Republicans not to support American aid to Ukraine is dangerous, it's wrong. Anybody who's today saying they don't support aid to Ukraine needs to be asked, and frankly, I hope they will be asked in the candidate forum tomorrow night for Speaker, why in the world would you be engaged in surrendering to America's adversaries? Because that's what that is. If you do not support aid to Ukraine, given the global atmosphere and the context in which we're living, you are in fact helping America's adversaries. You're demonstrating weakness at precisely the moment when we need to be showing strength. So it's dangerous and ill-informed.
Congresswoman Cheney, stick around. We have some questions to ask about the candidates for Speaker coming up. We'll be right back after this.